The Galactic Council's emergency session had been called for the third time in as many cycles, and Ambassador Zixathala could feel the familiar dread settling in her chromatophore patches. The subject, as always, was the humans. "They've done it again," announced Council Prime Vorthak, his tentacles writhing with barely contained frustration. The human colony on Kepler 442b has somehow survived what should have been total annihilation. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the barren, radiation-scorched surface of a planet that had been bombarded by a Class 7 solar flare just 2 rotations ago. No known species could survive such an event. The Council had already prepared the memorial statements. "Show them the footage," Vorthak commanded. The display shifted to surveillance data from the human colony. What they saw defied all logic and understanding of survival protocols across the known galaxy, where other species would have huddled in their deepest bunkers and prayed to whatever deities they worshipped. The humans had done something characteristically impossible. They had turned the disaster into an advantage. "Freeze there," called out Ambassador Krill, her compound eyes focusing on a particular section. "What are those humans doing with the solar collectors?" The image showed a group of humans dismantling their solar power arrays, not to hide them but to reconfigure them. They had somehow reversed the polarity and turned them into massive electromagnetic shields, redirecting the deadly radiation around their settlement like water around a stone. "That's not the extraordinary part," Vorthak continued grimly. "Watch what they do with the radiation itself." The footage continued. The humans had constructed crude but effective radiation capture devices from mining equipment, kitchen appliances, and what appeared to be children's toys. They were literally harvesting the deadly solar energy and feeding it into jury-rigged power cores that kept their entire colony running at 150% efficiency. Ambassador Zixathala's patches flickered with disbelief. "They turned the extinction-level event into a power source?" "It gets worse." Vorthak's voice carried the weight of defeated resignation. "They've now requested to purchase the mineral rights to 3 more planets in the path of solar flare activity. They want to set up what they're calling storm farms." The council chamber fell silent except for the subtle harmonics of various species' breathing apparatus. This was not the first time the humans had presented them with such an impossibility. Captain Rex's Tar of the Hegemony Defense Corps spoke up, his warriors' pride still stinging from their last encounter. "My lords, with respect, I must report on their latest military adaptation as well." He activated his own display, showing battle footage from the Rigel conflict. The Hegemony had deployed their most advanced weapon systems, gravity disruptors that could crush starships like paper. "We disabled their primary vessel's engines, life support, and weapons systems," Rexstar reported. "Any sane species would have surrendered." The footage showed the human ship, the UES Defiance, drifting apparently helpless in space. Then something extraordinary happened. "They ejected their crew compartments," Rexstar continued. "But instead of evacuation pods, they turned them into kinetic projectiles. They used their own life support systems as guidance computers and their emergency beacons as targeting systems. 17 improvised missiles, each one guided by a human pilot who manually calculated trajectory while experiencing 12 Gs of acceleration." The display showed the human crew compartments streaking toward Hegemony vessels, their hulls glowing white-hot from atmospheric friction as they plowed through the enemy formation. "They turned their own ship into ammunition," whispered Ambassador Kill, her psychic tendrils recoiling in what might have been horror or admiration. "The battle report gets more disturbing," Rexstar admitted. "When we boarded their crippled mothership expecting to find a few survivors, we discovered they had converted the entire vessel into a trap. The artificial gravity generators had been rewired into a massive electromagnetic pulse device. The food replicators were producing improvised explosives. Even their waste recycling system had been turned into a chemical weapons laboratory." "What happened to your boarding party?" asked Vorthak, though his expression suggested he already knew. "They didn't fight us with conventional weapons." Rexstar's mandibles clicked with nervous energy. "They used everything. Light fixtures became projectile launchers. The ship's internal communication system had been turned into a sonic weapon. One human threw a food processor at my lieutenant, a food processor that had somehow been modified to emit a neural disruption field." Ambassador Zixthala accessed her species' vast cultural database, searching for any precedent, any explanation for this behavior. In our studies of developing civilizations, we've observed that most species develop along predictable paths. They create tools for specific purposes: weapons for war, shields for defense, power sources for energy. She paused, her chromatophores cycling through colors that had no translation in most languages. But humans, they don't seem to see objects as having fixed purposes. A mining laser becomes a weapon. A food preparation device becomes a communications disruptor. A children's toy becomes a component in a radiation shield. Everything is potential. Everything is adaptable. That's what makes them so terrifying, Vorthak concluded. Other species master their environment by creating specialized solutions. Humans master their environment by refusing to accept that anything has only one purpose. The council sat in contemplative silence, each member reflecting on their own encounters with human adaptability. Finally, Ambassador Kill spoke up. Perhaps, she suggested carefully, instead of viewing this as a threat, we should consider what we might learn from them. The silence that followed was different, not the silence of fear but of possibility. Rextar was the first to break it. My warriors could learn from their tactical flexibility. Our engineers, added Ambassador Krill, might discover new applications for existing technology. Zixthala felt her chromatophores shift to a pattern she rarely displayed, hope mixed with cautious respect. Everything is a tool to humans, she mused. Perhaps it's time we learn to see the universe through their eyes. Vorthak's tentacles stilled for the first time since the session began. Motion to establish a cultural exchange program with the human colonies? The vote was unanimous. As the council session ended, each ambassador carried with them a new perspective, that perhaps the most powerful tool in the universe wasn't any device or weapon, but the human ability to see potential where others saw only limitations. In the vast cosmos where most species sought to master their tools, humans had mastered something far more fundamental: the art of making everything into a tool.